If Lee Zeldin becomes the next governor of the state of New York, but he continues to have a Democratic-run legislature, is there something he can do to help advance gun rights in New York State? The answer is absolutely yes. We'll talk about it when I get back. Hey folks, I'm Mark Smith, host of the Four Boxes Diner, constitutional attorney, member of the United States Supreme Court Bar, best-selling author, and proud American gun owner. If you have not subscribed to the Four Boxes Diner Second Amendment channel, please do so and show your love for the right to keep and bear arms. And we encourage you to send our videos around to your friends on various social media platforms as you see fit. Okay, big election going on tomorrow in the state of New York and all across America. But I want to talk specifically about an idea that I have that involves situations where you, let's say, have a pro-gun governor and an anti-gun legislature, which is the case in places, let's say, perhaps in Virginia in part. I think the Senate is still controlled by the Democrats. And in New York State, potentially, you could have a situation where you have a Republican and presumably pro-gun Republican in the form of Lee Zeldin as the governor of the state of New York. But you would probably continue to have anti-gun Democrats running the two state houses, the Senate and the Assembly, in Albany there. So odds of getting pro-gun legislation through or repealing through legislation anti-gun laws, gun control laws, probably not likely given that the legislature does not want that, is my best guess at least. So what could a Governor Lee Zeldin, for example, do to advance the Second Amendment and gun rights in New York State, assuming he has a deadlock between his views on the Second Amendment and the views of the legislature in the Second Amendment? Well, there's many things he could do, but I want to focus on one idea that I think is sort of original because I'm not aware of anyone proposing this in the context of Second Amendment, pro-Second Amendment governors or anything like this. Here's my idea. We know that NYSERPA versus Bruin was decided in June of 2022 by the U.S. Supreme Court. It says we have a Second Amendment right not just to keep guns in our homes, loaded and unlocked for the possibility of self-defense uses. We also have the right to carry guns under the right to bear arms. So here's my idea. What powers does a governor, a pro-Second Amendment governor, have that he can use without having to consult with the legislature? Well, one of the jobs or one of the authorities, powers, if you will, that most governors have, including in New York, under the New York State Constitution, is the power to pardon, to grant clemency. Now, to pardon basically means that if you've been convicted of a crime, you can be pardoned, and at that point in time, it's like the crime never occurred. Basically, that's what a pardon is, that even if you've been convicted, you basically go back to square one. You've not been convicted of that crime, anything like that. Now, usually the concept of clemency means you've been convicted of a crime and a governor says, we're going to continue to maintain the fact that you were convicted of a crime. We're not going to get rid of the fact that you were convicted of a crime, but I'm going to grant clemency here in the form of reducing your sentence to time served, or you can get out of prison, anything like that. So that's the difference between a pardon power and clemency. So under New York law, and you can take a look at the New York State website, get into the details of this. Under the New York State Constitution, the governor of New York has the power to grant clemency to individuals who have been convicted of crimes under New York law. The governor cannot, of course, grant clemency for federal convictions or for convictions in other states or countries. But keep in mind that one of the other powers that the governor has is the governor of the state of New York has the power to grant reprieves, commutations, and pardons after conviction for all offenses except, I believe, for things like treason or impeachment, which is not applicable to what I'm about to say. So what am I about to say in context of the Second Amendment? Well, we know that after NYSERPA versus Bruin was decided, the New York State Legislature with Governor Kathy Hochul, all of whom now hate guns and are very upset that the Supreme Court says they have to respect the freedoms and rights of Americans that happen to live in New York or travel to New York, and they're very upset about that, and they passed all sorts of zany gun control laws that are being challenged in the court now. So if I were advising a Governor Zeldin, which we don't know if he'll be the governor when I shoot this video, we'll see, but if I were advising Governor Zeldin or any Republican that's pro-gun in a state that is bad on guns, here's what I would recommend they consider doing. I would say, look, to the extent that you think there are unconstitutional gun laws in the book, and I think almost all of New York's gun laws are basically unconstitutional, what you can do as the governor is say the following. If anyone is convicted of a Malum Prohibitum crime, meaning a victimless crime of a crime that is simply labeled a crime because the legislature says so, then I'm going to grant a pardon. Remember, there's two types of criminal laws in America. There's what are known as crimes that are malum in se. Now, crimes that are malum in se basically is a Latin phrase for things that are evil in and of themselves. They're evil in and of themselves. Those are very obvious crimes that anybody, even if you didn't live in a civilization, would recognize there's a moral component, there's something evil about them inherently. What crimes are we talking about that are malum in se crimes? Those are things like murder, rape, robbery, theft, fraud. Right? These are just obviously wrong things to do, even in a state of nature where there's no civilization. Doing these kinds of behaviors is just sort of immoral and felt immoral, and they're just clearly evil on their face, regardless of whether or not there are laws against them or not. Those are laws that are malum in se. You have specific victims that are being victimized by a predator improperly, and that is what malum in se crimes are. But then you have this other category of crimes that is basically the entirety, as I see it, of gun control laws in America. These other crimes, and this is very important for you just to understand this distinction, these other crimes are known as malum prohibitum. Malum prohibitum. Now, what malum prohibitum crimes are crimes that are only crimes because the government says so. For example, these are administrative crimes. These are just things that the government says. So, for example, the government says that a basic semi-automatic rifle in your closet in California, let's say, is a crime. There's no victim. There's nothing moral about it. There's no morality connected to having a gun in your closet just sitting there. There's no victim. There's nothing to it. But because the state of California, for example, or whatever the state is, any legislature says that's a crime, well, that is a malum prohibitum crime. It's a crime just because we say so. There's no inherent moral component to it at all. Likewise, having a 15-round magazine instead of a 10-round magazine in your closet in certain places is another example of a malum prohibitum crime. There's nothing evil about it. There's nothing inherently immoral about it. It's just a crime because the government says it's a crime. That's it. So virtually all gun control laws in America are basically malum prohibitum crimes. There's no victim associated with these crimes if you carry a gun. Let's say you carry a gun into a so-called government-mandated gun-free zone, which is a sensitive place, and you carry a gun into that place by mistake or just carried a gun anyway, and you're arrested for having it there. There's no victim. There's nothing immoral about it. You've just crossed the line that the legislature has drawn. And it's a crime, yes, but it's a malum prohibitum crime. There's no moral component to it. It's just because we said so. It's like mommy saying or daddy saying, because I said so, because I'm the mom, and I pay the bills around here. It's just because it said. There's no moral component. That's what malum prohibitum is. So here's what I would recommend that Governor Zeldin do if he were asking me. I would basically say ahead of time, look, if any New Yorker or anyone who's an American citizen for that matter that's allowed to have guns under federal law, meaning they're not a prohibited person, they're not a felon in possession, they're not have not been civilly committed to a mental institution, those things. In other words, if someone is not a prohibited person under federal law from having firearms, under 18 U.S.C. 922G, then what I would say is if that person is convicted of any of these malum prohibitum crimes at all under New York law, and it doesn't involve a victim, specifically, it's not like pled down from like beat somebody up and you plead down to a gun crime as a lesser charge or something like that. If there's no victim involved and you're just busted because you crossed some line with a gun that you're not supposed to, or you carried a gun without a license because it takes 2 years, and we're going to talk about that issue in a second, but it takes 2 years to get a gun license and you carried because you couldn't get seen by the police department. Any of these things, if I were the governor, I would say, I'm going to pardon you. Now, again, if it turns out that you used the gun improperly, you shot someone, you brandished it, you did something illegal, in addition to merely the malum prohibitum crime of stepping into a sensitive place or carrying a gun, whatever it is, I would basically say that those people should be pardoned. Now, again, I would draw these lines out very clearly ahead of time, and as the governor, I would send this message out to everyone in the state, including the prosecutors. And I would basically tell all the district attorneys, and I would tell the state police that I control as the governor, I would tell everyone the following. Here are the rules of the road. If someone is merely convicted without a victim, there's no victim here, violating the so-called new gun control law, I'm going to pardon them. I'm going to pardon them immediately. Okay, and here's the criteria. Now, again, there'll be certain exceptions, possibly. Again, if there's a violent crime victim, someone has been misused against something like that. But if we're looking at simply someone has crossed some line into a so-called sensitive place, or they have not properly held the gun right, or, any of this sort of nonsense stuff that the anti-gunners are trying to use to trip up law-abiding Americans into losing their Second Amendment rights, I would have a criteria laid out that says I am the governor, I'm going to pardon these people. Because there's no reason for us to because remember, if you get convicted of a felony for any of these gun laws, you probably have lost your gun rights for life all across America. Now, there's other constitutional problems with that, but we're not going to get into that in this video. But my suggestion is, if Governor Zeldin becomes the governor of New York, he should say he's going to pardon anyone that's ever convicted of these crimes. He should send out a memo that lays it out in extreme detail, what he's going to pardon and what he won't pardon, so that everyone knows the rule of the road. And I would say this would be how I, as governor that was pro-Second Amendment, would get around the legislature if they weren't willing to repeal some of these clearly unconstitutional laws. And as opposed to forcing New Yorkers to spend years litigating them, I would solve the problem of the power of the pardon. And I would be very upfront about it. I would not hide the fact that I'm doing this. I would declare it up front and say to district attorneys, you can waste your resources on prosecuting these cases and punishing these gun owners, but I'm telling you, as the governor of New York, I'm going to pardon them. So it's going to be a waste of your time. That's what I would say. Again, don't know if Governor Zeldin is going to be the governor. Don't know if he's going to win. Don't know what's going to happen. But this is my idea. And again, there may be some twists and turns to my idea that you guys will point out to me where I'm right or I'm wrong. I'd be curious to see what you all think. But again, this is an idea I have because I've been thinking long and hard about what does a pro-gun governor do when the legislature insists upon upholding unconstitutional laws or laws that violate the Second Amendment or the spirit of the Second Amendment. What can a pro-gun governor do? And this is the idea I came up with. And you guys will let me know what you think about it. Okay, I hope you learned a little bit something here at the Four Boxes Diner. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. And we'll see you again soon here at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.